we should probably talk about Tim Walz. That's the last thing I've got on my list, and we're coming up to 2 hours now, and it's almost midnight, so probably want to wrap this up soon. But we'll get on to Tim Walz at the very least, because I think that despite the Democrats being very shit for a lot of different reasons, I think Tim Walz has some positives. And for once, like, even if we don't want to talk about the Democrats being good or bad in terms of their policy platform or who they are politically, at the very least, right, what is interesting to see is the Democrats actually take strategic decisions, actually take correct strategic decisions for once. Like, of course, they were going to alienate their own base by picking somebody who wasn't having a progressive opinion on the Israel-Palestine conflict, who didn't have a progressive opinion on teachers' unions, for example, who had some shady stuff in his past as well in terms of Josh Shapiro, and picking somebody who I think is strategically the best choice, right? So for those who don't know, Tim Walz is the governor of Minnesota. With his 1-seat majority in the Minnesota legislature, passed loads of stuff like free pre-K, free college education for some people as well. He passed better minimum wages, legal weed, trans protections, trade union bargaining rights, sectoral bargaining for certain sectors of the economy. He had things like free school meals for children, free parental and sick leave. Like, so many things had been passed through the Minnesota legislature on his progressive platform. Something that you don't usually get from Democratic governors or Democratic legislations. Gavin Newsom has an absolutely gigantic level of support, both personally as the governor of California and legislatively in the California House and Senate. Do they pass progressive policy with that? No, they keep their whole fucking state gentrified and are cracking down on homeless populations as well. So, this is not the usual situation you have for Democratic governors, and with a tiny 1-seat majority, no less, passed all of this excellent progressive policy. In terms of the person who he is, he's affable, he's likable, he has large-scale appeal. It's just like, a nice granddad type. He's not a corporate Democrat, as you say, Monkey Spoot him. He connects with people. He's from a rural community. Like, he used to be backed by the NRA, but now they've gone against him because he also put in red flag laws for guns and changed his mind off the Parkland shooting. So he is somebody who can be swayed by evidence. He bases his positions on evidence rather than on, his own kind of personal biases. I think his rhetoric is very good. So something that you've seen from the Democrats over the last few weeks is a change in messaging, a change in message discipline. Rather than talking about Project 2025, which is bad, and talking about the Republicans' threat to democracy, which is also bad, they realised that lionizing and speaking catastrophically about your enemies allows people to take that and run with it. It's much better for fascists, because Donald Trump is a fascist, I believe, a proto-fascist. It is easier for fascists to curry favour if they are perceived as iconoclasts, if they're perceived as a threat, if they're perceived as powerful. They thrive on power, they thrive on machismo and weaponry, as has been stated by Umberto Eco many times. They thrive on the feeling of being the outsiders against the establishment. This is how Donald Trump won the elections in 2016, because the Clinton was the establishment candidate. It has been decades. You have to go back to the 70s for an election where no ticket had a Clinton, a Biden, or a Bush on it. That's how long you have to go. That's how long this political dynasty exists for. And so we fought against that. But we don't have that anymore with a Harris and Walz ticket moving forward. So that is a plus point in how they change the messaging. And so instead of talking about Trump as being an existential threat, even though he is one, they know that it doesn't land well with swing voters. So they just started calling them weird. This was Tim Walz who came up with this epithet to use against the GOP, because it's true. They are weird. Whilst Tim Walz has the progressive policy platform to back it up, he has the progressive policy platform to say, look at all of the things I passed through in my state as governor. He can point at the GOP and say, well, what policies do they have? Are they going to help you with healthcare, with the cost of living, with the cost of childcare, with your working relationship with your boss? Because they represent the petite bourgeois rather than regular working class union folk across the Rust Belt, which are the swing states for the election, right? The people who he's winning over are people who are going to be union workers from the Rust Belt who saw their deindustrialized areas lose all their jobs, just like the Red Wall over in the United Kingdom. It's the same shit in a different country. The way he's going to be able to speak to these people by talking about real bread and butter economic issues. And then if you compare this to the GOP, rather than buying into the culture war and saying you hate transgender people, you hate black people, you hate single mothers, you hate people who aren't Christian, and then you attack them over things like reproductive freedom. Rather than attack them as being uniquely evil and dangerous, you say, look, we have economic policy, we have child tax credit policy, we have student loan forgiveness, we have expansionary fiscal policy and investment in industry. If they have a progressive policy platform when it comes to the election and on the manifesto, they'll be able to run on that too, rather than just on the record that Tim Walz is running from in terms of his Minnesota governor record. And they'll be able to say from there, well, look, do they have a healthcare plan? Their foreign policy plan is bad. Of course, Walz is pro-Israel, the Democrats are pro-Israel, but the foreign policy in terms of things like Russia or Turkey is better. Of course, Trump famously was one who sold out the Kurds to Erdogan, and that should never be forgiven when it comes to foreign policy. There are plenty of reasons why they can point to being on policy better than the GOP. So rather than talking of the culture war and fighting them on culture war grounds, you call them weird and say they're obsessed with the culture war, and then you talk about bread and butter issues. You say they're busy talking about children's genitalia, which they are doing, they're literally doing that. They're talking about banning books and getting involved in doctor and patient relationships with reproductive healthcare, with trans healthcare, trying to get rid of gay marriage, trying to do all of these things, like banging on about weird shit like critical race theory, which doesn't mean anything to most people on the ground, right? Do they have a healthcare plan? No. Do they have a tax credit plan? No. They have tax cuts for corporations. Tim Walz, in an interview, even said, right, a venture capitalist, do they really have any kind of connection with the regular working class Americans? No, of course they don't. Like, I was a teacher. Tim Walz. He was a fucking teacher. He knows what real life is like for people. So he gets to be able to play this card. And that's why it doesn't work. If you say that they're weird and then fight them on the culture war, ignore the culture war. Get rid of the culture war out of your lexicon. Just say, they're obsessed with weird culture war shit. We are the ones with real policy. Of course, the devil will be in the detail. The devil will be in the detail when we see how the actual policy platform is put down when they actually make their manifesto for the presidential election. That's going to be the crux of the issue. If they move to the centre and become a moderate party, they will lose lots of support and they'll have nothing to run on. But if they actually have a progressive policy platform that they can bring to the population to bring people around and stand on a positive campaign against the negative campaign from Trump and Vance, I think they'll do well. Again, the devil will be in the detail, but we shall see. And this really is an inspired move. It brings positivity, it brings energy to the campaign. Polling has showed, since Biden dropped out, and Walz and Harris have taken over, people have suddenly started doubting Trump's ability to be a president. They're starting to talk about his age, which you couldn't do when Biden was on the ticket. The fact that Tim Walz is very pro-union as well is really encouraging. The thing I was most worried about, chat, the two things I was most worried about when Biden dropped out of the election, is that the one thing about Joe Biden that he has in his pocket is that he had the ear of Bernie Sanders, and Bernie Sanders had his ear too. It's why Bernie Sanders was the head of the Senate Budget Committee, and why Stephanie Kelton was advising on economic policy, and why Janet Yellen was doing supply-side investment policy with expansionary fiscal policy, 7% deficits, trying to invest in new industry and bring back jobs to America and try and run on a full employment macroeconomic platform, right? That's what you got out of the Biden-Sanders Unity Task Force. You didn't get change on foreign policy, which is sad, but what you did get from the Sanders-Biden Unity Task Force was better macro financial policy specifically. So, with the other thing that Biden did, which was really good, was stand on picket lines. He was explicitly endorsed by Sean Fain from UAW. Now, you can criticize Jennifer all you want for his foreign policy decisions. Believe me, I do too. You will have seen me do this on Novara on my stream. But having a president who stands on picket line from a Democratic Party ticket, that's something that you would never have gotten in however many times beforehand. And I was worried. I was worried when Joe Biden dropped out of the running that you wouldn't be getting this from the new ticket. I was worried they would move back to the centre, try and be corporate Democrats and play towards the centre again. And with Walz on the ticket, that becomes less likely. So in Minnesota, it's not the Democratic Party per se. It's a Democratic caucus, but it's the Democratic Farmer Labour Party, which is slightly more union and labour-based in terms of policy than the regular corporate Democratic platform. So them choosing a senator who's part of the DFL wing of the Democratic Party shows that they're going to be continually committed to actually talking positively about trade unionism, which is positive in broad sense. They'll appoint a pro-Labour head of the National Labour Relations Board, which has allowed Starbucks to have all this great unionising. It's allowed the United Auto Workers to be as militant as they have been with the auto companies in all of these Rust Belt states, and the Teamsters and what have you. They've been able to organise much stronger. Amazon Workers United as well, with Christian Smalls. The reason they're in the position to organise is because they have a pro-Labour head of the National Labour Relations Board. And if there was a Josh Shapiro on the ticket who's been kind of anti-Labour in the past, I don't think we would have gotten that. And I think that it would have been the election would have been theirs to lose, and they would have deserved to lose if that was the case. But with Walz on the ticket, I think the chance of the National Labour Relations Board head and their labour market policy overall being anything more right wing of the Biden platform is that's out of the question now. I don't think Walz would let it happen given his background and given the wing of the party that he belongs to. So two of my biggest concerns have been assuaged. Of course, Kamala was better on Palestine and Israel than Biden was, slightly. Not necessarily on a large scale, she is still very much pro-Zionism, but even so, it's clear from her messaging that her concern for Palestinians was much greater than Biden's. But obviously this all goes out the window now because the regional conflict will drag Kamala back in. And I think this was Netanyahu's plan, was he saw that the support was waning, so he tried to do something that would guarantee American support, which is going to war with the common enemy of Iran. But we'll see what happens. I'm not going to make any comments yet. And Tim Walz obviously is very pro-Palestine, very pro-Israel in his position, just like every single Democrat in the country. None of them are pro-Palestine outside of Rashid Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, really and truly. Let's be real here. I'm not expecting miracles. I'm not expecting anything better than nothing, really and truly, from the Democratic Party. So this is better than my expectations already. But one thing does stand out in terms of how Walz approaches the disquiet over Israel-Palestine is that he took the uncommitted vote seriously. He said specifically that the uncommitted voters have a legitimate point of view. They clearly have been disenfranchised by the party platform, and we cannot expect them to come back. We have to win them back. And this explicit endorsement of the things that were being said by the uncommitted vote is far more than you got from any other Democratic Party official, really and truly, outside like the Squad or the Social Democratic wing of the party. And so that gives me some hope. So yeah, Democrats never perfect. They're never perfect. They're never good. They are a neoliberal corporate party, and they always will be. But they have some people in their ranks who are better than you would expect from the Democratic Party. They are the only bulwark against Donald Trump at this point. And I personally believe, and you may disagree, I think Donald Trump is an existential threat to the continuation of the human fucking race. And it's because of climate change that I believe that. I think his climate policy will destroy the hope of us actually dealing with the climate crisis. And of course, his probably not particularly diplomatic policy towards Middle East politics will probably lead to something even worse than we have now. But even so, I think he's an existential threat to America at the very least, and to the world more broadly in terms of him being trusted with the red button. And so, given that the Democratic Party, having seen the fact that they would lose votes by running an anti-Palestinian candidate on the ticket, I think this is enough to say that we should put differences aside and try to stop Trump. The Democrats have listened to our concerns with the uncommitted voters. They've listened to our concerns over picking Josh Shapiro, and we're now at the point where somebody who has a genuine progressive economic policy platform from his own state on the ticket. Again, we'll have to see what the platform looks like when they actually come down to it at the election. If they have a shitty manifesto, all of this may be for nothing. But at this point, the single bulwark, I guess in swing states, of course, like if you're living in a safe state, you can vote for Cornel West all you want and you have my blessing. If you're in California, if you're in Colorado or Oregon or Washington State, there is no reason for you to vote Democrat. You can vote Cornel West all you want. You have my blessing to do so. But I think it's worth manning the bulwark right now if their policy platform is good. And also what's worth it with the Palestine stuff as well is that the people who abandoned Biden over Palestine from his own staffing office, right? Both Muslim and Jewish Americans together quit as Biden staffers because they felt they couldn't in good conscience continue because of his ridiculous policy over Palestine. He is gone, and those people say that Kamala was better than he is. So I'm not doom-pilled about the American election anymore. Maybe I'm so undoom-pilled I'm not being critical enough, and believe me, I'm open to criticism, but this is the best we were going to get. This was the best we were going to This is the best we were going to get. Somebody who previously had co-signed Medicare for All on the presidential ticket, and someone with a very, very progressive policy platform from their own state as a vice presidential ticket is probably the best we can expect from a corporate party like the Democrats. And I think it's worth at least taking the olive branch that has been extended to progressives and uniting against Trump, and then we'll see what happens when they're in government. Because again, there'll be another election, and they'll want our votes again, and then we'll have to make demands and expect concessions from them to win those over. Because clearly, we made our demands, and they're making concessions to us now. That's my position on the Walz-Harris situation. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for memberships. It's just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.